I wanted to reflect upon a few ayat of the Qur'an to sort of set the stage for the discussion that we have today. And a lot of times you can appreciate an ayah more once you can situate it in Seerah, or you can relate it to your modern context. And if you could do both, then that is the best way to do tadabbur, right? The best way to actually have that moment of introspection. And I want to lay the foundation of the set of ayat that I'll speak about inshallah ta'ala with the reality that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam often had to have regroup moments with his ummah. You know, regroup, a fitna breaks out, people fall into some sort of strife, and he's got to bring everybody back together, sit them down, and remind them of why they're doing this in the first place. That has to happen many times in the seerah. And it's remarkable how the Prophet ﷺ is always able to bring these people back to the same table and to get them working for common cause. And I want you to think about this reality. Let's take Uhud, for example, just as a very simple example of what this looks like. If Uhud was the only episode that we studied of the seerah in this regard, how many archers were on the mountain? 50. How many of them came down out of the 50 in disobedience to the Prophet ﷺ? 40. 40 of them came down from the mountain because they thought that the battle was over. As a result of that, they left the back of the Muslims compromised, and from a means perspective, from an asbab perspective, this is where you start to see the defeat happen. This is where you actually see the fracture is clear and the defeat happens, right? Imagine being one of those 40 people who came down and then having to reintegrate into the community. That's one step of this, like, how am I going to show my face after what I did? After this type of a mistake. This isn't a mistake that made us vulnerable to an extent to where we got some bad PR as a Muslim community. This didn't cost us a little bit in the da'wah. This cost lives. It's cost over 70 lives, this mistake that we made. How do you come to terms with the guilt, right, of having been one of those people that messed up so bad, and now you have to show your face in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ and the community? All right, look at the other side of that. Imagine being one of those people whose husband was killed, or whose father was killed, or whose son was killed, and you have to pray next to one of the 40 archers. Would you be able to do that? Right? Would you be able to carry that anger and still pray next to the person who made such a colossal mistake that your father was mutilated, your husband was mutilated, your son was mutilated? That's a difficult thing to get past and to pull people back together. See, for the Prophet ﷺ, he forgave the people that did the most horrible things humanly possible to him. He not only forgave them, he smiled at them, he integrated them into his community sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But that's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He has a different type of capacity. But like, I have to learn to pray next to the guy that messed things up, that dropped the ball and got my father killed. That's how the shaitan is going to play with me in that regard. The Prophet ﷺ has to regroup that community. A very simple question that I ask people: can anybody name a single one of the 40 archers that came down from the mountain? No. You know why? Because Allah Azza wa Jal protected them. The Prophet ﷺ protected them. They were reintegrated into the community. It's not even like later on someone says, this person was one of the 40 archers. They weren't shamed. They were admitted back into the community fully. Why? Because they weren't hypocrites. There is a big difference between the munafiqeen who went out to Uhud, and in the very beginning of the battle, they looked for the first excuse to come out, and then they destabilized the community from within, and they turned their backs on the Prophet ﷺ. Prophet ﷺ went out to Uhud with 1,000 people. 300 left before the battle even started, and they were the hypocrites. But those 40 that came down from the mountain were not hypocrites. They fell into a moment of weakness. And so they can't be treated the same as those people who deliberately tried to hurt the Prophet ﷺ from within. Rasulullah ﷺ understands these nuances of people. And so he's able to sit people back down when things get nasty and bring them back together around common cause, around common purpose. This was the juggling act of the Prophet ﷺ as a leader from the very beginning. He understands ﷺ that he's bringing a message of La ilaha illallah, not just to a people that worship hundreds of idols, but to a tribalistic society that treats those idols like teams and corporations and cults. Every one of those idols represents a psychology, represents a whole ecosystem that he has to penetrate through all of that tribalism and classism and racism with La ilaha illallah, with one God, one purpose. It has to strike all the way across. It's very difficult. He tries, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in Mecca to speak to people's tribal sensibilities without compromising the integrity of the message, which is very important. He doesn't come to them and demolish their tribes. Instead, the Prophet ﷺ speaks to the best qualities of those tribes. He asks them to live up to their best versions of themselves, but no longer put down others or create identities on the basis of those tribes. So, Banu so-and-so, you are known for this, and that. MashaAllah, come into Islam and refine that good quality. Leave the other garbage behind. So he's aware of those tribal sensibilities, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he tries his best to manage how to speak to those different mindsets and those different tribes without compromising the integrity of the message. And he has a hard time in Mecca. And ultimately, the steam, the fuel that drove him out of Mecca was that he didn't belong to their tribe. Their tribe, meaning whoever was the antagonist of the Prophet ﷺ in that moment, he's not one of us, he's one of Banu Hashim. And so to Abu Jahl, it doesn't matter how eloquent you are, it doesn't matter what guarantees you can give me, at the end of the day, you are not from Banu Makhzum, you're from Banu Hashim, I can't give you that type of leverage over me. I will oppose you with every fiber of my being. And subhanAllah, before he even sets foot in Medina, you already have those tribes from the people of the book that knew from the Torah that the Prophet ﷺ was going to enter into, that the awaited Prophet would come here, but when he wasn't from my tribe, no way, I hate him, he's my enemy. You imagine, like, people settled that region because they read the signs of the book that this is where the Prophet would come. As soon as they learned that the Prophet was not amongst them, we can't have that. He belongs to a different tribe. On top of that, the Prophet ﷺ is coming to a city which is basically 40 plus encampments, sub-tribes of Aws and Khazraj, whose fathers had all killed each other off in tribal warfare. So he's leaving one mess of a community in terms of the Meccan society, and he's walking into arguably a worse mess. See, in Mecca, they didn't kill each other off in the immediate history. They had some skirmishes and battles and stuff like that. But like the tribal warfare in Medina is next level. But who embraced the message? Who took it all in? Common cause, common word, a common covenant made all of these people put their differences aside, at least when it mattered most, to rise to the occasion. At least when it mattered most, to rise to the occasion. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overwhelmed them to such an extent that everything else that used to dominate their consciousness was now less. You see, as human beings, we have tribal instincts. You know, in fact, subhanAllah, one of the biggest mistakes we make when we do politics, by the way, is we assume that people are ideological. Most people are not ideological. Most people are just tribal. They want to cling to something that offers them comfort. The way they think like I do, they talk like I do, they resonate with my being. I want to belong to something. And so most people vote along the lines of tribe, political tribe, not along the lines of ideology. They're pulled into identity, right? We make the mistake when we think most people use this. Most people act with emotion. They don't use their brains. right? The Prophet ﷺ has to walk into that mess. And he has to get them all on the same page quickly. Okay, let's bring it back to now one of the verses that we'll start off with, which is the main verse that I start with. Okay? وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says, hold on to the rope of Allah, all of you together, and do not be divided amongst yourselves. SubhanAllah, there is an imagery of pressure. We often rise to the best versions of ourselves under pressure. Okay? There has to be a sense of urgency. On an individual level, when you're too comfortable, that's when you can lean into your corruption, your own personal facade, and waste away in a bunch of stuff that is of no benefit to you because you don't have a greater purpose. We talk about people that embraced Islam because of Gaza. How many young people started taking their religion more seriously because of Gaza as well? Like, wait a minute, like, this is a lot more serious than I thought. When you look at the people around Salah ad-Din, some of them were alcoholics converted into warriors overnight because they realized, I have a greater purpose. Like, this is serious. I can't keep thinking about wasting away my own self. Greater purpose has dawned upon me. I have to rise to the occasion. Okay? There's a very famous story, subhanAllah, of Abu Mihjan, al-Thaqafi. Abu Mihjan was a man who in the time of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was an alcoholic. He kept getting drunk. And eventually, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, you know what, I'm just going to tie him up and leave him back. Like, I'll deal with him later. He said, no, but I need to go to the Battle of Qadisiyah. This is the most important battle of the Muslims. I need to rise to the occasion. Sa'd radiallahu anhu said, you're just too much into your alcohol. You're too self-centered in the worst of ways. That's not what he says, but this is the implication. Just, you stay back. And it dawned upon him, like, here I am wasting away myself while the Muslims are in the most consequential moment of their lives. Right? Like, this is a serious moment and I need to rise. So what does he do? He convinces the wife of Sa'd to let him go to the Battle of Qadisiyah. He wraps his face up. Sa'd's wife sees the sincerity, wraps his face up, goes, he fights, he comes back, and he lets himself be imprisoned once again. And all the Muslims are talking about, who's this guy that came out of nowhere, that thrust himself into the battlefield, and that was so brave and courageous, but he had his face wrapped. We didn't know who he was. No one would have thought it's the alcoholic. But the guilt got to him. Like, how am I wasting away doing this nonsense when there's a serious moment that's calling me? So when Sa'd radiallahu anhu gets back to the house and he tells his wife what happened, she says, do you know who that man was? He says, who? He says, your prisoner. He said, really? So he goes and he lets Abu Mihjan loose. He tells him, go free. He said, I'll never lash you for drinking alcohol again. He said, I'll never drink alcohol again. I'm done, I got it. Clicked. A lot of the young people in here, Gaza woke you up just like it woke a bunch of people that aren't Muslim up to the reality of Islam. It woke you up to the reality of your purpose. Like, wait a minute, I've got something serious to do now. I've got to actually involve myself in a world that has a lot of problems, too many for me to waste away in my own desires. Higher calling. There's a pressure that creates a sense of urgency. When the Prophet ﷺ stood up on the Mount of Safa, he created an immediate sense of urgency. I want you to imagine if there was an army that was coming behind you, behind that mountain. Urgency. Well, guess what? There's something that is also an imminent danger in the hereafter. I'm trying to help you and save you from that. I'm trying to grab you from jumping into a fire, like to the point that I'm holding you by the waist belts and saying, don't jump into that fire. Think about how Allah Azza wa Jal creates that sense of urgency in the Qur'an, right? Al-urwatul wuthqa, hold on to the trustworthy handhold. You can't trust anything else in this world to remain stable except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever it is that you're anchoring your sense of stability in, it's going to let up at some point. Hold on to al-urwatul wuthqa, the trustworthy handhold. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talking about a time that will come where the sunnah will become so foreign to people. Tamassaku bi sunnati, hold on to my sunnah, even if you have to bite onto it, bin nawajiz, with your back teeth, like someone trying to rip something out of your mouth. Hold on tight, right? Hold on tight. Don't let it be taken away from you. There's a sense of urgency that's being created. So the image that comes to mind, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, hold on to the rope of Allah, all of you together, is an image that strikes you as like something, just a hole just opened up under you and a bunch of people are about to fall into that hole. Everyone grab onto that rope together. Help people grab onto that rope. Pull people onto it. Be noble. The baseline of being intelligent in that moment when the rope is extended from the sky as the people are drowning is to grab onto the rope. That's the baseline of intelligence. The most prophetic implementation of that rope of Allah is to bring people onto that rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to use the strength that you have with one hand, bring people and get as many people onto that rope as possible, extend it as much as possible. That's what the Prophet ﷺ did with the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at least, don't be dumb, don't drown. Grab onto the rope of Allah, right? Grab onto the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So grab onto the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of you together, try to extend that rope. Try to get people on board if you can. Grab people with the other arm if you're strong enough to hold onto it with one arm. Grab people onto it and hold onto that covenant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Ahd. Al-Ahd, the covenant. The same book that tells you how to act in war tells you how to act in marriage. And they're not the same thing. All right? The same book that tells you how to act with your communal lower desires tells you how to act as an individual when you're pulled by your lower desires. Hold on to the covenant of Allah. What is the rope of Allah? It is the Qur'an. It is the Qur'an. At the end of the day, this book, this revelation, this message, this risala, took a bunch of people that have nothing else in common and turned them into brothers and sisters. It's incredible. Not only that, like you go to any masjid and you look around and you're like, what would have brought these people under the same roof? Right? What would have made them the same? You go to Mecca, you do tawaf and you look around. Is there anything else that would have brought this diverse group of people to perform the singular act except for a message that was higher than everything else that they identified themselves by? Okay? And subhanAllah, the verse before, by the way, is Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who believe, be mindful of Allah the way that you should be mindful of Allah and don't die except as Muslims. Your identifying characteristic, your identifying feature becomes Muslim. وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. Who is better than the one who calls to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who believes, who acts? But he says, I'm a Muslim. My defining feature is that I'm a Muslim. Before every other identity, other identities can exist as long as they are in the capacity of, the understanding of, and they are subjugated to my identity as a Muslim. Hold on to the rope of Allah together. Now, when was this verse revealed? Some of the ulama say it was revealed between Badr and Uhud. Some of them say after Uhud. I incline towards it being right after Badr, and I'll tell you why. Allah Azza wa Jalla talks about people that otherwise were going to kill each other. Okay? They were on the edge of the fire, like they were about to all perish in this life and the next. And that refers to the Ansar, Aws and Khazraj. Mecca didn't have that type of animosity amongst themselves. Medina did. Aws and Khazraj. Now I want you to think about the Battle of Badr. The Battle of Badr, you had almost 80%, actually more than 80% of the Muslim side were Ansar. They were people of Medina. Okay? And they were protecting the Prophet ﷺ against who? His own people. His own qawm, Mecca. All right? Quraysh in Mecca. You're fighting alongside people, and your fathers killed each other. You were divided. But now, you're making sacrifices for one another. Now, you're taking in an entirely different group of people, and that's healing the wounds that you had amongst yourselves. يُحِبُّونَ مَنْ هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِمْ. They love those who migrated to them. They couldn't even love each other before. And now they love those that have migrated to them, people that were completely foreign to them because of the message. You're protecting a Prophet ﷺ who you just met. They only knew him for a year. You are exerting yourself for a mission, a message. You're on the battlefield together. You're risking your lives because of common cause. And subhanAllah, on the Meccans that are amongst you, the Muslims that are amongst you, that came from Mecca, their parents and their brothers, their blood brothers and blood fathers are coming from Mecca to kill them. Think about, subhanAllah, how this joggles everything that was known to the Arabs. You have a Meccan Muslim that's standing across from his father, from his brother, his blood brother, right? And you have the Ansar, who are horizontal from Medina, the Muslims from Medina, that are from entirely different tribes, whose fathers killed each other. And Allah Azza wa Jal dangles this rope from the heavens, and suddenly all of those identities disappear with Islam, with the Qur'an. And you grab onto it. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Do not be divided. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. And remember the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon you. إِذْ كُنْتُمْ أَعْدَاءً فَأَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ بِنِعْمَتِهِ إِخْوَانًا. Remember the blessing, the favor of Allah upon you. This was the khutbah yesterday, by the way. Udhkur, remember the blessing of Allah. Before you can thank Allah, remember the blessing of Allah upon you. When you were enemies, and He united you at the level of the heart. And so you became, by His blessing, ikhwana, brothers. He took you from being people who hated each other to being people that were willing to die for each other. Just like that. Because common cause. It drowned every identity. It drowned every tribalism. It all became secondary. SubhanAllah, when two people are married and they have common cause, then they're able to drown their differences in that common cause, in that common covenant. I mean, people that are both seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are not going to destroy their lives and their afterlives over petty disagreements. I'm trying to do ihsan to you because I want Allah Azza wa Jalla's favor. You're trying to do ihsan to me because you want Allah's favor. That's how we get over the natural human differences that we have. And we relegate them to a secondary plane. And that's the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's nothing but the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that makes that possible. So the identity of Islam drowns out every identity. The mission of Islam drowns out every mission. The calling of Islam drowns out every calling. You know what this looks like today, by the way? In the communal sense? When people are fighting online, or your masjid is fighting another masjid, or board members are fighting amongst themselves, or this group of people, this race of people are fighting that race of people. You know, I always say this, like, we were not just watching the people of Gaza over the last 2 years, they were watching us as well. Can you imagine being in Gaza, scrolling, and this is what you fight about? This is what you argue about? This is what you're dedicating your lengthy posts about? This is what you're making videos about? This is what your concern is right now? Trying to take out your brother, trying to take out your sister? This is what you do? It's just as offensive as you posting your videos and pictures of your food while people are starving and seeing that on their feed. Equally offensive, if not more offensive. Like, we have not been sufficient of a unifying cause for you to get your act together and drown out whatever was dividing you before? What is wrong with you? We're in the middle of a battle right now. We're getting exterminated here. Are you going to rise or not? Or are you going to keep on drowning in petty disagreement? Common cause drowns out all the other stuff. Then comes the second verse. You see, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا is amr, it's a command. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and do not divide yourselves, is nahi. It's a prohibition. Affirmation, negation. Allah always gives you two opposite sides of the coin. To suggest that the human being can never be idle. You can't just be as you are. You're either doing something good or you're doing something bad, and if you're in the neutral, then you're most likely to get pulled into the bad. If you're not moving forward, you're going to move backwards. Okay? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, and this is in Surah Al-Ma'idah, تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Work together. بالبر والتقوى. Bir is the most extensive word to describe good deeds. Public good deeds, private good deeds, acts of worship, acts of societal good. Bir is the most expansive word. تعاونوا على البر. Work together in bir. ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about what bir is in Surah Al-Baqarah, what that expansive good is, you know what it is? It's taking care of the poor. It's freeing the slaves, freeing the captives, honoring the orphan together, visiting the sick together, taking care of people together. Activate towards something else. Activate towards something good. تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. Taqwa is the most cautious approach to sin, meaning holding yourself back from sin with caution. Fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that causes you to pause when you see something that could take you away from Allah azza wa jal. Some of the ulama said, al-bir bit-taqwa. You have to have a noble goal and you have to have noble means as well. Sometimes we as Muslims and other people, of course, will justify the ends or justify the means by the ends, right? So we have a noble goal, therefore we can do everything that we need to do, even if we don't have taqwa of Allah, we don't observe Allah's regulations and binding prohibitions. We got to cheat, we got to deceive, we got to eliminate, we got to do this, but at the end of the day, we got a good goal. It doesn't work that way in Islam. So work together with noble goals and with noble means as well. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا بِالْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. And don't work together bil-ithm. Ithm, so bir is the most expansive way to describe good. Ithm is the most minor way to describe evil. Ithm is something that disconnects you from Allah. Because at the root of every sin is it creates a gap between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It creates a gap between you and Allah. It's not going to bring you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's going to take you further away from Allah. Bil-ithmi, so hold yourselves back from al-ithm, from the smallest sins. Don't work together on these things. Wal-udwan, which is full out transgression and harming people. See, the Prophet ﷺ taught, and I'll end with this inshallah ta'ala. And inshallah ta'ala, we can phase into the marriage side of this as well. Prophet ﷺ, when he said, Unsur akhaka zaliman wa mazloom, zaliman aw mazloom, support your brother, whether he's an oppressor or whether he's oppressed. Like, can you imagine, like, you've been Muslim now and you've put aside your tribal differences, and the Prophet ﷺ drops the most tribal slogan ever. This is such a tribal slogan, right? And every culture has it. Like the Arabs have the, me and my brother against Ibn Ammi, against my cousin, right? They all got these things, right? And then me and my cousin against the world. We all have these things, okay? The Prophet ﷺ just drops without context the most tribal slogan ever. Unsur akhaka zaliman aw mazlum. Wait a minute, what did you just say? See, ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa, by the way, is one of the last verses, Surah Al-Ma'idah. This is now the community's built. Now move forward. Okay? Support one another. You know each other, you love each other, now move forward. Active progress. And the Prophet ﷺ says, Unsur akhaka zaliman aw mazlum. Ya Rasulullah, we understand how to support the oppressed. We don't get how to support the oppressor. He said, by stopping him from being an oppressor. Let me tell every single one of you, subhanAllah, that this affects every single dimension of life. Every single one. You know how? In-laws. All right? My daughter is married to this person. my son is married to this person. My daughter wronged this person, but she's my daughter. My son wronged this woman, but that's my son. And so what am I going to do? I got to protect my son. I got to protect my daughter. At the end of the day, we're going to retreat, entrench ourselves back into our sides. By helping your son or your daughter wrong their spouse, you're actually facilitating a place in hell for them. You're not doing them a favor. You're not helping them. You're making them worse. You're enabling a narcissist. You're making things worse for them because you're destroying their akhirah. You're destroying their hereafter. Your friend, who when you're sinning, and I'm going to say this like to the youth level too, you publicize a newfound sin of yours. You do something you shouldn't be doing. Your friend who puts that heart on that status of yours or who congratulates you is your enemy. Because that's a person that doesn't care about your hereafter, doesn't care about your akhirah. They'll put you into hell in the name of friendship, in the name of loyalty. I help my brother, I help my sister, I help my daughter, I help my son, I help my husband, I help my wife. I help the people that I love by holding them back from oppressing, because when you're an oppressor, you have to face the consequences in the hereafter. And I don't want you to face the consequences in the hereafter. And even if that means you're going to be mad at me, I'd rather stand in front of you and say no, because I don't want you to go to hell. Not only do I care about the person you're hurting, I don't want you to hurt yourself. Right? Even if you're going to turn on me, there is a mission, a cause that runs deeper than blood, that runs deeper than friendship. And the Prophet ﷺ taught us, love your brother, love your sister, love the one that you love, right? As you should. But love them by bringing them back to the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so if you don't have friends, companions that will check you when you're sinning, those aren't people that you want to be around. Those aren't people that you want to be around. They make you comfortable, but they're making your hereafter a whole lot less comfortable. Okay? The same thing is true when we have disputes in the community, or we have cliques or cults egg each other on. You know, I got to support my tribe because this person supported me back then. We got to work together, even if I know that he's wrong. You're just facilitating that person right to hellfire, kicking them right off the rope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it matters most to not drown, when you need salvation most. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to work together and find people around us that have common cause. And may Allah Azza wa Jal unite us around the Qur'an, around the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, around the legacy and the values and the tradition of adherence and inspiration that has been given to us through the heroes of our tradition and those that supported them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to aspire to our higher callings collectively and individually, so that we don't drown in our lower desires and our lower passions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to collectively unite for the people of Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to collectively unite for the people of Sudan. May Allah Azza wa Jal allow us to collectively unite for every group of people that are struggling in this dunya. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to collectively unite to call people to good around us and to work towards what is best for them and best for us in this dunya and in the akhirah. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.